And in international news, leaders of the BRICS nations, the world's top 5 emerging markets, gathered today in the southern Chinese beach resort Sanya for their annual summit. The meeting included Chinese President Hu Jintao, Brazilian President Dilma Rousseff, Russian President Dmitry Medvedev, Indian Prime Minister Manmohan Singh, and newest member South African President Jacob Zuma. The group discussed ways to enhance the role of emerging economies in global affairs, the political developments in the Middle East, and commodity price volatility. As part of a drive to boost trade and investment among their economies, the leaders signed an agreement to extend mutual credit lines denominated in BRICS currencies. Also, the BRICS head of state said they supported a broad-based national reserve currency system, coded language for reduced reliance on the US dollar.
The developments in West Asia and North Africa and the aftermath of the huge tragedy that befell Japan have introduced fresh uncertainties in the global recovery process. At the same time, the world continues to grapple with threats to security from forces of terrorism and international piracy.
And more on India, business spending in the country is on the rise according to the Regus Business Confidence Index. Marketing spending is witnessing a significant increase, while many Indian businesses are spending less on property due to companies' stricter cost control policies. The report further stated that departmental spending is forecast to rise this year and that many companies are showing rising revenues and profits. The Regus report also showed that 81% of global companies expect to freeze or cut their property spending, with 70% of Indian companies expected to follow suit. Moving over to the US now, President Barack Obama on Wednesday proposed spending cuts and higher taxes on the rich to slash the US budget deficit by $4 trillion over the next 12 years, saying Republican plans for deeper reductions were too radical. President Obama outlined that the approach puts every kind of spending on the table, but one that protects the middle class. With the US deficit expected to hit $1.4 trillion this year, the president proposed major cuts in the defense budget, reforms to the government's Medicare and Medicaid insurance programs, and ending Bush-era tax benefits for the wealthiest Americans. However, Democrats are resisting the heavy spending cuts the White House is proposing. Also, a congressional debate is going on over raising the $14.3 trillion legal U.S. debt limit, because the Treasury Department projects that the country will reach this limit as soon as mid-May. If the debt ceiling is not raised, the U.S. could default on its debt.
Some will argue we should not even consider, ever, raising taxes, even if only on the wealthiest Americans. It's just an article of faith to them. I say that at a time when the tax burden on the wealthy is at its lowest level in half a century, the most fortunate among us can afford to pay a little more.
And over in Japan, nearly 60% of the country's companies have been affected by the earthquake and tsunami that hit the country on March 11th, a Reuters poll shows. Disrupted production and supply chains are the key problems, which also sent corporate confidence in Japan to a record low in April. According to a Reuters poll of 400 large Japanese companies, business confidence fell back into negative territory for the first time this year. The gloom was widespread, affecting both the manufacturing and services sectors. Nearly 70% of the respondents said the single biggest problem for them is the lack of supply. Toyota, for example, is planning to stop production at 5 plants across Europe for several days in April and May due to a lack of supplies shipped from Japan. Before we head back to news, let's take a quick look at the Asian equity, commodity and the currency markets, and after that, Mona Nasser is back with the news.